The wilderness has always called to me. Ever since I was a child, the allure of the great outdoors has been irresistible. The vast expanses of untouched nature, the whispering winds through the trees, and the distant calls of wildlife have always felt like a second home. It's a place where I can truly be myself, away from the constraints and expectations of modern life. It's a siren song of peace and solitude. The gentle rustling of leaves, the soft murmur of a flowing river, and the occasional chirp of a bird create a symphony that soothes the soul. In the wilderness, time seems to slow down, allowing me to savor each moment, each breath, and each heartbeat. It's a sanctuary where I can find clarity and perspective. A place to escape the noise and chaos of everyday life. The constant hum of traffic, the incessant buzz of notifications, and the never-ending stream of responsibilities can be overwhelming. But in the heart of the forest, all of that fades away. Sitting by a campfire, watching the flames dance and flicker, I find a sense of peace that is hard to come by in the city. Lying in a hammock, swaying gently with the breeze, I feel a deep connection to the world around me, to reconnect with something primal and ancient. The towering trees, some of which have stood for centuries, remind me of the enduring strength and resilience of nature. The untouched scenery, free from human interference, is a testament to the beauty and power of the natural world. It's a humbling experience, one that puts my own life and struggles into perspective. So when my friends suggested a camping trip to a remote forest, I didn't hesitate. The idea of spending a few days immersed in nature away from the hustle and bustle of daily life was too tempting to resist. We gathered around a table, maps spread out before us, and planned our adventure. The excitement was palpable, and we could hardly wait to set off. I was eager to answer the call of the wild. We packed our gear, loaded the car, and set off into the unknown. The anticipation of the journey ahead filled us with a sense of adventure and freedom. As we drove, we talked about the places we would explore, the trails we would hike, and the memories we would create. We packed our gear, loaded the car, and set off into the unknown. The road ahead was winding and unpredictable, much like the journey we were about to embark on. Each turn brought us closer to our destination, and further away from the familiar comforts of home. The thrill of the unknown was exhilarating, and we embraced it with open hearts and minds. The further we drove, the more the city faded behind us. The tall buildings and crowded streets gave way to open fields and dense forests. It was a gradual transition, but with each passing mile, we felt a weight lifting off our shoulders. The worries and anxieties of city life seemed to melt away, replaced by a sense of calm and anticipation. It was like shedding a skin, leaving behind the worries and anxieties that clung to us like cobwebs. As we walked through the forest trail, the tall grass brushing against our legs, we felt a renewed sense of freedom. The air was fresher, the colors more vibrant, and the sounds more harmonious. It was as if we had stepped into a different world, one where we could truly be ourselves. As we ventured deeper into the wilderness, I could feel my pulse slowing, my breath deepening. The stresses of everyday life seemed to fade into the background, replaced by a profound sense of peace and contentment. The deeper we went, the more connected I felt to the world around me. It was a journey not just into the heart of the forest, but into the heart of what it means to be truly alive. As the sun began its descent, casting long shadows across the forest floor, we gathered around a crackling campfire. The flames danced and flickered, casting an ethereal glow on our faces. We shared stories, laughter, and sipped hot chocolate as the stars twinkled above us. The forest came alive at night. The chirping of crickets provided a constant background symphony, punctuated by the occasional hoot of an owl, or the rustling of leaves, as some unseen creature moved through the undergrowth. It was both exhilarating and slightly unnerving to be so far from civilization, surrounded by the raw, untamed beauty of nature. Exhausted from the day's activities, I finally crawled into my tent and zipped myself inside. The sleeping bag was warm and comforting, and it wasn't long before I drifted off to sleep. But it was a fitful sleep, plagued by strange dreams and unsettling images. I woke with a start in the dead of night. Something had disturbed my sleep, but I couldn't tell what it was. The fire had long since burned out, and the forest was cloaked in an eerie silence. The air inside the tent felt heavy and oppressive, as if some unseen presence had entered while I slept. Cautiously, I unzipped the tent and peered out into the darkness. The forest was shrouded in an impenetrable blackness, the only light coming from the stars overhead. The humming continued, seeming to draw closer. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped out of the tent, my bare feet sinking into the damp grass. The air was thick with moisture and the smell of pine needles. I shone the flashlight beam into the darkness, but it only seemed to accentuate the shadows that danced at the edge of the light. The silence was unnerving. It pressed in on me like a physical weight, suffocating the sounds of the night. My heart pounded in my ears, a frantic rhythm against the backdrop of nothingness. I strained to hear anything, any sign of life, but the forest held its breath. Then I heard it again. A whisper, soft and low, carried on the breeze. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, a disembodied voice slithering through the trees. I froze, my blood turning to ice in my veins. Drawn by an unseen force, I moved towards the source of the voice. It seemed to be coming from the direction of the lake. The moon peeked out from behind a cloud, casting a silvery glow on the water's surface. And that's when I saw it. A faint glimmer of light flickered near the water's edge. It was like a firefly, but brighter, more intense. It pulsed with an otherworldly glow, beckoning me closer. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, my gaze locked on the glowing doll. It lay on its side, its painted eyes wide and staring, as if watching my every move. It was then that I noticed something else. Footprints. Small, bare footprints in the damp earth leading towards the doll from the edge of the lake. They were too small to belong to an adult, too perfectly formed to be animal tracks. Suddenly the doll flickered and the light went out. Darkness swallowed the shore, plunging me back into a world of shadows and whispers. I blinked, trying to clear my vision, but the darkness remained. I swung my flashlight beam back and forth, desperate to find the doll, the footprints, anything to prove that what I had seen was real. Blindly, I scrambled back through the undergrowth, my flashlight a useless appendage in my trembling hand. The darkness was oppressive, wrapping around me like a suffocating blanket. Every step I took seemed to echo in the silent forest, amplifying my fear. The beam of my flashlight flickered, casting eerie shadows that danced and twisted, making the forest seem alive. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, each beat a reminder of the danger lurking behind me. Thorns tore at my clothes, branches whipped at my face, but I didn't dare slow down. The pain was sharp, but it was a small price to pay for my life. I could hear the rustling of leaves, the snapping of twigs, and the distant hoot of an owl, all blending into a symphony of terror. My breath came in ragged gasps, each one a struggle as I pushed myself to keep moving. The forest seemed endless, a maze of shadows and sounds that threatened to swallow me whole. The image of the doll, its vacant eyes burning into my soul, propelled me forward. It was as if those eyes were following me, watching my every move, judging me. The doll was a harbinger of the horrors that awaited me if I stopped. Its presence was a constant reminder of the malevolent force that pursued me. I could almost hear its sinister whisper, urging me to give in to the darkness. Each rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig, sounded like footsteps behind me. The forest was alive with the sounds of my fear, each noise amplified in the stillness of the night. I could feel the presence behind me, a cold, malevolent force that seemed to be closing in. My mind raced with thoughts of what could be following me, each one more terrifying than the last. The fear was a living thing, wrapping around me, squeezing the breath from my lungs. I didn't dare look back. To look back would be to acknowledge the terror that pursued me, to give it power over me. I had to keep moving, had to stay ahead of whatever was behind me. My only hope was to reach the edge of the forest, to find safety in the light of dawn. But the forest seemed endless, a never-ending labyrinth of shadows and fear. Each step was a battle, each breath a victory. I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that if I stopped, if I turned around, I would see her. The little girl from the lake, her ghostly image forever etched in my mind. She was the embodiment of my deepest fears, a specter that haunted my every step. Her eyes, filled with sorrow and malice, seemed to pierce through the darkness, reaching into my very soul. I could feel her presence, a cold, clammy hand on my shoulder, urging me to turn around, to face my doom. The little girl from the lake. Her story was one of tragedy and loss, a tale that had been whispered among the villagers for generations. They said she had drowned in the lake, her spirit forever bound to its dark waters. Her ghostly figure was often seen wandering the forest, searching for something or someone. The villagers believed that anyone who saw her was doomed, cursed to join her in the watery grave. I had always dismissed the stories as mere superstition, until that night. Her ghostly image, forever etched in my mind. I could see her pale face, her eyes filled with an unearthly glow, her hair floating around her like a dark halo. She was both beautiful and terrifying, a vision of sorrow and vengeance. I knew that if I stopped, if I let her catch me, I would be lost forever. The forest would become my prison, and her sorrow would become my own. I had to keep running, had to escape the darkness that threatened to consume me. The night was my enemy, and the dawn my only hope. The remnants of our campfire flickered feebly in the darkness, casting long, distorted shadows that danced and writhed like tormented souls. The tents, our havens for the night, lay in shambles, ripped and torn as if clawed at by a wild animal. "Hello?" My voice, hoarse and thin, echoed through the stillness. "Anyone?" But the only response was the mournful sigh of the wind as it whistled through the trees. Where were they? What had happened here? As I stood there, paralyzed by indecision, I noticed something glinting in the faint light of the dying fire. It was lying near the base of a tree, a small metallic object reflecting the ember's glow. I rushed over and picked it up. My heart leaped with a flicker of hope. It was Sarah's compass, the one she always carried with her on our hikes. She must have dropped it during whatever chaos had descended upon our campsite. The forest seemed to close in around me, the darkness pressing down with suffocating weight. The air grew thick with humidity, making it difficult to breathe. The scent of pine was replaced by a cloying metallic odor that clung to the back of my throat. The compass led me on a winding path, twisting and turning through the undergrowth. I stumbled over roots and rocks, my clothes torn and my body bruised, but I didn't dare stop. I had to find my friends. I stumbled back, fear gripping at my throat. Something was terribly wrong. This place, this lake, it was the source of the terror that had infected our night. Through the mist rising from the water, I saw her, the little girl in the white dress. She stood at the water's edge, her back to me, her long dark hair flowing in the wind. Her humming filled the air, a haunting melody that sent shivers down my spine. The humming intensified, vibrating through the air, seeping into my bones. My head throbbed in sync with the eerie melody. It was as if the very forest were whispering, chanting a language I couldn't understand but felt deep within my gut. The girl by the lake turned slowly. Her movements were jerky, unnatural, like a puppet controlled by unseen strings. Moonlight glinted off her face, or what I could see of it. The rest was obscured by a thick black veil that hung from her head. Adrenaline surged through me, overriding the fear that threatened to paralyze me. I had to get out of there. My friends, they were in danger. I had to find help. I turned to run, my legs churning through the undergrowth. Branches whipped at my face, thorns tore at my clothes, but I didn't slow down. The humming, the growling, it was getting closer. Something was hunting me. Hope, fragile and fleeting, flickered in my chest. Sarah, she was alive. They were alive. I just had to reach them before that thing did. The forest floor became littered with signs of struggle. A ripped piece of fabric snagged on a thorny bush. A discarded backpack lying open, its contents scattered like fallen leaves. The trees began to thin and I stumbled out into a small clearing. In the center, a single lantern flickered, casting long, dancing shadows that stretched and contorted like phantoms. And there, huddled around the lantern's meager light, were my friends. Relief, so profound it brought tears to my eyes, washed over me. My heart plummeted to my stomach. It had been a trap, all of it. The compass, the lantern, the clearing. The entity had led me here like a lamb to the slaughter. The growling intensified, vibrating through the air, rattling my teeth. The creature leaned down, its rancid breath hot on my face. I could smell the decay, the rot, the stench of death that clung to it like a shroud. Sarah's words jolted me back to reality. For a moment I hesitated, torn between the urge to fight to protect my friends and the primal instinct to flee. But one look at the creature's face, contorted in a grotesque mockery of a smile, told me that resistance was futile. I didn't need to be told twice. I spun on my heel and ran, my legs pumping, my lungs screaming for air. The forest floor blurred beneath my feet, a treacherous obstacle course of roots and rocks illuminated only by the faint moonlight filtering through the canopy. The forest seemed to stretch on forever, a never-ending labyrinth of darkness and despair. The air hung heavy with the stench of decay, the cloying sweetness of death. I could hear the creature crashing through the undergrowth behind me, its heavy footfalls shaking the ground like an earthquake. Ahead, through the trees, I saw a glimmer of light. The parking lot, our car, salvation. A surge of adrenaline propelled me forward, my legs burning, my lungs on fire. I stumbled and fell, scraping my hands on the rough bark, but I scrambled back to my feet and kept running. The parking lot was just yards away now. I could see the outline of our car, the glint of moonlight on its windshield. Hope surged through me, mingled with a desperate fear that it was all just an illusion, a cruel trick of my exhausted mind. But as I staggered towards the car, I heard a voice, soft and low, whispering my name. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, a chorus of whispers carried on the wind. I stopped, my heart pounding in my chest. "Sarah?" I called out, my voice cracking with fear and exhaustion. "Mark? David?" But there was no answer, only the mournful sigh of the wind as it whistled through the trees. I was alone. The car keys were clutched in my hand, a lifeline to sanity and safety. I fumbled with them, my fingers numb and clumsy, but finally managed to unlock the door and slide behind the wheel. The engine roared to life, a sound both comforting and alien in this place of whispers and shadows. But the memory of that night, of the terror that unfolded in those dark woods, would stay with me forever. I had looked into the abyss, had glimpsed the raw, primal power that lurks beneath the surface of our world, and it had left an indelible mark on my soul. The police never found any trace of my friends. They dismissed their disappearance as a tragic hiking accident, a group of inexperienced campers who had lost their way and succumbed to the elements. But I knew the truth. The silence was the worst part. After the screams, the chaos, the desperate flight through the darkness, the silence was a deafening void. It was the silence of absence, of unanswered questions, of lives brutally interrupted. I returned to a world that continued to spin, oblivious to the horrors I had witnessed. The city lights seemed garishly bright, the traffic noise a cacophony after the oppressive silence of the forest. People went about their lives, their faces etched with the mundane worries of daily existence, unaware of the darkness that lurked just beyond the edges of their carefully constructed realities. I retreated into myself, seeking solace in the solitude I once found in nature. The forest had always been my sanctuary, a place where I could escape the chaos of the world and find peace within the embrace of the trees. But now, that peace eluded me. The once comforting sounds of the forest now felt like a cacophony of unsettling noises. The chirping of birds, the rustling of leaves, even the gentle babbling of a nearby brook. All of it seemed to carry an undercurrent of menace that I couldn't shake off. But the wilderness held no allure for me anymore. It was as if the very essence of the forest had changed, becoming a reflection of my own inner turmoil. The vibrant greens and browns of the foliage now appeared dull and lifeless, mirroring the emptiness I felt inside. The air, once fresh and invigorating, now seemed heavy and oppressive, filled with the weight of my own despair. It was tainted, poisoned by the memory of that night. The night that changed everything. The night when the shadows came alive and the darkness seemed to swallow the light. I could still hear the echoes of my own screams, the frantic beating of my heart as I ran through the trees trying to escape the unseen terror that pursued me. The rustling of leaves sounded like whispers, like the forest itself was trying to tell me something I didn't want to hear. Each gust of wind seemed to carry with it a message of dread, a reminder of the horrors that lurked just out of sight. The shadows seemed to writhe with unseen forms, twisting and contorting in ways that defied logic. They danced at the edges of my vision, always just out of reach, always just beyond my understanding. It was as if the darkness itself had come alive, taking on a malevolent form that sought to consume me, and every moonlit clearing held the potential for unspeakable horror. The pale light of the moon cast long, eerie shadows that seemed to stretch and grow, creating shapes that played tricks on my mind. Each clearing felt like a stage set for some terrible event, a place where nightmares could become reality. I haunted the fringes of my own life, unable to fully step into the light, yet too afraid to embrace the darkness. I was caught in a liminal space, a ghost in the machine, drifting aimlessly between two worlds. A ghost in the machine, a shadow of my former self. I wandered through the days, disconnected from everything and everyone around me. The world moved on, but I remained stuck, trapped in a loop of my own making, unable to fully engage with the world around me. I watched as life continued, as people laughed and loved and lived, while I remained on the outside looking in. It was as if an invisible barrier separated me from the rest of humanity, a barrier I couldn't break through no matter how hard I tried. The city, once a symbol of progress and civilization, now felt like a fragile facade. The towering buildings, the bustling streets, the constant hum of activity, all of it seemed hollow and meaningless. The city that had once been a beacon of hope now felt like a prison, a place where I was surrounded by people yet utterly alone. Now felt like a fragile facade, a thin veneer masking the primal darkness that lay just beneath the surface. The bright lights and busy streets couldn't hide the shadows that lurked in the corners, the darkness that threatened to consume everything in its path. A thin veneer masking the primal darkness that lay just beneath the surface. The cracks in the buildings, the peeling paint, the dilapidated structures, they were all reminders that nothing was as it seemed. Beneath the surface, chaos reigned and the darkness was always waiting, ready to rise up and take over.